the Chase Vault. It was built in 1774.
The first person buried in here was James Elliot, who was only 34 years old. His wife, Elizabeth Waldron, built his vault for him.
We don't know if Elizabeth or any of her children were buried here.
The next person we know buried in his vault is Thomasina Goddard, and that is in 1807. But James Elliot coffin was not in here. But in 1808 is when the trouble started. Two-year-old baby was killed by her father and buried in his vault. Then in 1812, teenager Dorcas Chase was buried in his vault. 4 years later, her sister was starved to death and buried in his vault. People say he killed Dorcas by starving her to death. Just 1 month later, her father killed himself when they opened the vault to bury him.
The coffins were in disarray.
Dorcas's and Marianne's coffin was not where they were left. The two girls' coffins were thrown across the room of the vault. Marianne's coffin was at the back of the vault, standing on top of its head, and Dorcas's coffin was all on the other side of the vault. People passing in the church yard on the night heard moans and screams coming from in the Chase vault. Then 4 years later, they opened the vault to bury another baby. All 3 of the coffins were thrown upside down. 2 months later, they buried that baby's father.
Once again, the coffins were in disarray.
They fixed them back and left it for another 3 years. By this time, the vault had become very famous. So when the vault was opened again in 1819,
to bury Thomasina Clark,
hundreds of people packed the churchyard. The coffins were upside down and all over the place, and one coffin broke on the back wall and the arm was sticking out. The other Combermere, the government of the island, ordered the coffins to be put back in place and the vault to be sealed.
Nearly 1,000 people attended the funeral, and Lady Combermere, the wife of the Governor of Barbados, recorded the events in her diary. She says, "In my husband's presence, every part of the floor was sounded to ascertain that no subterranean passage or entrance was concealed. It was found to be perfectly firm and solid, and not even a crack was apparent. The walls, when examined, proved to be perfectly secure. No fracture was visible, and the sides, together with the roof and flooring, presented a structure so solid as if formed of entire slabs of stone. The displaced coffins were rearranged. The new tenant of that dreary abode was deposited, and when the mourners retired with the funeral procession, the floor was sanded with a fine white sand in the presence of Lord Combermere and the assembled crowd. The door was slid into its wonted position, and with the utmost care, the new mortar was laid on so as to secure it."
After they buried her, the governor and other important men put their signatures on the wet concrete that sealed the woman in the vault. Months later, when they inspected the vault, the seals were intact.
They opened the vault, and the coffins were all over the place
This time, the governor ordered every coffin to be taken out.
and buried in different parts of the churchyard. And the vault has been empty ever since.